Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 137. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday. Steelers Nation, Dave, getting ready for OTA starting next Tuesday, the first of 6 practices, so not too far away from the Pittsburgh Steelers hitting the field. Things still pretty quiet otherwise, but a couple of news and notes and transactions to talk about today. So, Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You buried the lead there. The Pirates scored more than 4 runs last night. They couldn't even set a new record for futility. What was what they go 26 games, was it?
Leave 26, yep.
26 games without scoring 4 or more than 4 runs, and fortunately in the 9th inning they were able to top that last night, still in a loss to the Brewers. But at least we get to watch Paul Skeens pitch later today against the Brewers there. But yeah, we've got some news and notes and things to keep us busy for sure on this Friday. As we predicted, Derrick Harmon coming to terms here fairly soon. We had an idea that would happen based on him getting boxed in. We kind of wondered if it would happen by this weekend, and lo and behold, it did happen. So he is signed, sealed, and delivered. That means the entire 2025 Steelers draft class is all signed up and ready to go, and before OTAs got underway at that. So that's a nugget to start with here.
Harmon signing about a week earlier than Troy Fautanu did last year, so that's good to check those boxes. I know that rookie contracts are not the adventure that they used to be. It's why the CBA back in 2010 it was, that has these slotted contracts to have these things pretty paint by numbers to get done, because I'd forgotten how crazy some of these rookie contract situations would go. These holdouts, Andre Smith of the Bengals held out, I think, until late August. Michael Crabtree did not sign his rookie contract until October. He missed the first month of the regular season. So obviously that was an issue. The crazy contracts these rookies would sign, sight unseen, the guy that becomes a bust, gets paid $60 million, whatever the numbers were. And so it's a smarter system. I know the players are getting paid less initially, but I think it's just a better way to go about these contracts.
Yeah, and I think annually now the big holdup is how much, as we've talked several times, how far down does that line go for the guaranteed percentages when you get into the second and third round guys. Right now that line in the sand keeps kind of moving. That's why you see in some of these second rounders and I guess some of the early third rounders hold up on them around the league. The Steelers did not have that problem with the second round pick this year because they obviously did not have one, and their third round pick, Caleb Johnson, was low enough on the totem pole that he got done really early as well too. I do kind of wonder come CBA negotiation time, especially when it comes to 18 games and stuff like that. I think the NFLPA would be real smart as one of the pushes to get all draft pick rookie contracts fully guaranteed. I would imagine that would be some sort of a bargaining chip that they might push for. But until any of that starts coming to the surface and all, we'll leave that for another day. But the key point here is that the Steelers have all their draft picks under contract now, obviously all their undrafted free agents under contract, and some more sizable signing bonuses with this group overall this year.
Yeah, you have the numbers on the undrafted free agent class, and I know the UDFA pool number increases each year, so naturally some of the signing bonuses attributed to that also, go up each year, attached to that, I should say, more so than attributed. But point is, Pittsburgh with a couple of, $30K signing bonuses, and that for the Steelers, who generally don't spend much in undrafted free agency pool, that's a fair chunk of change.
Yeah, we had this year 3 players have all tied for the highest signing bonus when it comes to undrafted free agents for this year. DJ Thomas Jones, Rock Taylor, the wide receiver out of Memphis, and Aiden Williams, the offensive lineman there. So 3 of those with $30,000 signing bonuses. Next on the list was Sebastian Castro at $25,000 signing bonus, and JJ Galbraith, the tight end, $20,000 signing bonus. Ben Saul's even got $20,000 signing bonus. Keyshawn Williams, $10,000 signing bonus. Blake Mangelson, $3,000 signing bonus, and then the 2 guys that were signed after tryout rookie minicamp tryouts, Max Hurlman and Gareth Warren. Neither of those 2 received a signing bonus, and that's kind of status quo when it comes to that. So yeah, in totality, these 10 players, the Steelers doled out a whopping $168,000 in guaranteed signing bonus money. Now, no other aspects of the contracts are fully guaranteed. So, but overall, I think we were. I mean, at least where we sit right now, we've talked about this over the year. Over the years, we'd like to see the undrafted class be a little bit higher quality, and it feels like, you know, I don't know how many of these guys will end up making the 53-man roster, or how many will end up on the practice squad. But as a whole, it does feel like a little bit stronger undrafted free agent class for this team this year.
It certainly does. I do think some of that, as I mentioned before, can be attributed to a deeper pool with the COVID guys who went back to school in 2024, came out in the 2025 class. So I wonder if this trend will continue, because Pittsburgh's model has largely not changed. They don't offer the partial base salary guarantees that nearly every other team in the NFL does. They just offer signing bonuses. But we'll see. And for the here and now, on paper, as you said, never know how these things work out. But my issue with the undrafted pool in the past has not been, oh, these guys aren't making the 53. They're not becoming high impact players. It was a lot of these guys just come and go. They don't make the practice squad. They don't make it through training camp. They just completely offer you nothing at all. And I think you have a good chance for these guys to stick around in terms of being on practice squads and maybe being back with the team 2 years from now, next year. That kind of stuff is what I'm really optimistic about with this crop.
Yeah, just getting a higher quality of mud to throw up against the wall, right?
Exactly. We didn't mention, I don't believe, and I apologize for, we didn't mention that Max Hurlman was part of those post tryout signings. We talked about Gareth Warren. We talked about Trey Sermon, I think on that Monday show, but we didn't know Hurlman until after the fact. We should mention him. There was a really good interview that Ross Tucker did with Hurlman, talked about his experience in Pittsburgh. He's from Notre Dame. He played kind of everything in college. He started out at FCS Colgate as a running back and then switched to receiver, then transferred to Notre Dame, became a cornerback and punt returner, invited to Pittsburgh's camp, apparently played everything. He was playing running back, receiver, and defense and return line work, and then caught a contract. So cool story there for Max Hurlman.
Yeah, didn't he say something along the lines that Mike Tomlin told him to have two sets of jerseys, different colors to play offense and defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that tryout guys have to do, and Hurlman had that unique background to be able to do it. The conditioning, the versatility, those things create value, and I'm sure that's why Hurlman is now a part of the roster and getting ready for OTAs.
All right, good update there. And once again, that was a good interview with Ross Tucker there, and we've recapped some of the highlights of that on the site.
Who was your favorite UDFA of all the guys that they brought in? Was there a particular name that stuck out to you the most?
I'm just interested to watch a couple of these offensive linemen that we've talked about. Gareth Warren, and who was the other one? Aiden
Williams, from D2 Minnesota Duluth. So,
and then obviously the 2 tight end, the tight end / fullbacks. Interested to hear up on them. And I was a big Castro guy, dating back to the East-West Shrine game. Thought that just a real gritty type player, not didn't set the world on fire with the athleticism, but just seemed like a Steeler type of guy coming out of the Shrine Bowl. I wasn't hugely surprised that he went undrafted overall, but I think, yeah, once again, I think it just goes back to it feels like this is just a higher quality undrafted class, and I won't be shocked if maybe one of these guys makes the 53, and if several of them stick around on the practice squad after the preseason.
I wrote about 2 weeks ago the last time two UDFAs made the initial 53-man roster was 2018. That was Ola Adeni and Matthew Thomas. Remember Matthew Thomas, the athletic linebacker who's on Pittsburgh's roster for just a second, but made the initial 53. I think this year offers a chance for two UDFAs to make the roster again.
All right, so we'll be definitely paying attention to that once training camp gets underway, or really not. The OTAs coming up here, and then mandatory mini camp, and then on into training camp, and your fantastic reports. I'll be needling you for updates on several of those guys.
I know you will. Dave, I want to get to a salary cap update in just a couple moments, but I want to talk about one other big piece of transactional news, at least big for this time of year. Pittsburgh playing O-line shuffle. They released and waived Lecitus Smith earlier this week, and they replaced him by signing Nick Broeker earlier this week. It was at Wednesday or so. And so Broeker has only played a little bit in the NFL, formerly the Houston Texans, was waived by them in early May, now catching on with the Steelers as some offensive line depth. He's a nasty run blocker, some positional versatility, playing tackle, playing guard. Obviously, we'll have a climb to stick around on the 53, but that is the O-line swap from Smith to Broeker.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, did Lecitus Smith oversleep or something? You never really know why a swap like that was done, but you had already had going back a couple of years ago, had you personally did the pre-draft draft profile on Broeker and all, and what's your brief kind of overview on him?
That he's a phone booth blocker, not a tremendous athlete, but somebody aggressive with a mean streak who finished. He played tackle. He played guard at Ole Miss. And in the NFL, he's bounced around. He played some right tackle. He's played some interior offensive line at guard as well. And so we'll see what Pittsburgh uses him at. Maybe it is going to be some right tackle work, considering those still fairly thin. You have to think about for training camp, even for OTAs, you need to have 15 offensive linemen, at least three groups, first team, second team, third team. So you have to be able to fill out, those 13 tackle spots. Maybe Broeker gets a look there alongside opposite of Gareth Warren. So yeah, that was my interpretation. I liked this tape. I had a draftable grade on Broeker back whenever he came out. So obviously have to, see what he looks like and get him in pads. Once training camp gets going in August, the pads come on. So I don't want to, believe this guy's going to be anything more than maybe just an afterthought, but there's potential there. And there's certainly an opportunity for a Steelers offensive line that is pretty thin depth-wise.
Yeah, and he obviously hasn't had a lot of playing time in the NFL to date, but he has managed to log at least 2 credited seasons so far. So he's been able to stick around on some rosters to at least do that, and obviously became available. I think he was waived by Houston a couple week or 2 weeks ago or something like that, I think. So maybe they just felt like that was an upgrade from Smith to Broeker there as far as pedigree and position flexibility.
That's what it feels like to me. So Pittsburgh, I believe, still has one roster spot open. We'll see if that is earmarked for one Aaron Rodgers, but they should be sitting at 90. Am I wrong on that, Dave?
That's where I think I have him at right now, following the additions of Trey Sermon and a swap out of Lecitus Smith for Broeker. I believe I have him at 90 as well, too, under contract right now.
And for those who have not listened to past episodes, we say there's an extra spot on the 90-man roster because Julius Welshoff is the international exemption, which allows them to carry 91 as they did last year. And Welshoff could then be the 17th player on the practice squad. So just give that caveat for those who have not heard us discuss that before.
Yeah, and it's obviously way far out, and he had a pretty good preseason last year and then had the injury and all like that. And he still has the international designation. The Steelers did obviously Jack Sawyer at outside linebacker there, and got Jeremiah Moon, but it almost feels that, assuming he stays healthy and can take the next step forward this summer. Unfortunately, it all won't be foreign to him like it was last year. There's probably a really good chance that come the start of the season that we're talking about Welshoff as having the international status on the practice squad as the extra. What would that make it? 17th player, I guess.
Mm-hmm. There are restrictions the international exemption practice squad player has. They can't be activated. They can't be promoted unless they lose their international exemption and shed that. So there are some caveats that come with that. But yeah, I assume if he has the summer that he did last year and stays healthy this time around, he'll be on there with that exemption. And if they need him, maybe they will just discard the exemption and then treat him like a regular non-exempt player.
All right.
All right, Dave, where to from here? Let's talk about a quick Aaron Rodgers note. Art Rooney, the NFL had their second set of owners meetings. We'll talk about the Tush push ban failing and that kind of stuff in just a moment. But pertinent to Pittsburgh, Rooney apparently making a quick comment about Aaron Rodgers and basically repeating and doubling down what he said before about waiting a little while longer. Now, I think there is some maybe question and debate about what this comment meant. So the quote from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN was a little while longer. Some have taken this a reference to how much longer it will take for Rodgers to decide. Some have said it's a reference to how much longer Pittsburgh is willing to wait. Can we clarify what exactly that comment was referring to?
No, not based on that tweet, I don't guess, but it just feels like to me we're just waiting for Aaron to decide or not. In my heart of hearts, I have believed all along that I think this is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And what else are the Steelers going to say at this point? As we covered on the other show, there's not really many more doors to have to watch to see if they're open. And if they, if Rodgers does decide to retire, well, that obviously slams the door at that point. But if you slam the door in Rodgers' face on the other end of this and say, we're tired of waiting, we need a decision now, what other doors do you have left to open unless maybe you go out and try to pursue trade for Kirk Cousins with the Falcons? But it just, and then there was Aaron Rodgers showing up on the Joe Rogan podcast. Do we know exactly when that was recorded?
We don't. My understanding is they're probably recorded pretty recently in terms of when they air. So I assume the record date and air date were pretty close.
All right. And really, he didn't say much of anything during that long interview with Joe Rogan, kind of football or future related, other than to say, I guess a couple of people close to him or at least one is going through a cancer issue or whatnot. So perhaps that might be the personal, type things that he alluded to when he was on the Pat McAfee show. And yeah, I get it. He's still out there doing interviews and podcast interviews and showing up at concerts with a oversized water gun and all like that. I mean, you don't know what's going on, with scheduling and all like that. But I'm not surprised that as a whole we're sitting here just trying to dissect what Art Rooney said, as far as a little bit longer.
I'll just read Fowler's tweet. He says Steelers president Art Rooney II, who said April 1st that the Steelers will wait not forever, but a little while longer for Aaron Rodgers, delivered a similar line on his way out of Wednesday's owners' meetings. Quote, a little while longer, I'll say the same thing, he said, referring to Rooney. And so my understanding was this was about how much longer Pittsburgh will wait, less so than how much longer it will take for Rodgers to decide. But it feels like Pittsburgh will just keep saying a little while longer until Rodgers does decide. They're going to just keep saying this line because I think they feel they have no other option. They've waited this long. They might as well keep waiting. Rodgers is the best quarterback left, and they are kind of backed into a corner here. So I think whether it's May or June or July, the line will be the same, a little while longer until you set a deadline. And Pittsburgh seems to not be intent on setting a deadline. Then by default, you are waiting. And here we are, Pittsburgh, as they continue to wait a little while longer.
Yeah, and I guess Aaron Rodgers is like, don't put baby in a corner, so.
Well, I mean, he's never said like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's never come out and said that the team has given him a deadline or anything
Mhm.
like that. And he just it's going to happen when it happens.
Rodgers, I think, understands he has some leverage here. Pittsburgh is willing to wait for him, and frankly, in a sense, needs to wait. There's an argument to be made that Pittsburgh should not wait. And I've talked about my personal deadlines. Once OTA start, if there's no responsiveness from Rodgers, and certainly for mandatory minicamp, if there's no responsiveness, I don't know how Pittsburgh could justify continuing to pursue a guy who shows no interest in showing up and getting acclimated with the team and putting his hand in the pile, ready to work. So that's my personal standpoint. Does not mean it has to be the team's standpoint. But yeah, the wait continues on. As you said, the Rogan podcast. It was 3 hours. Almost none of it. Actually, none of it was talked about. No football was discussed at all. The only comment that was even semi-relevant for us, as you said, Dave, was Rogers making a reference to having someone in his inner circle, someone close to him, or multiple people who are battling cancer. And as you said, that kind of jives with the personal issues that Rogers has talked about of why his focus has not been on football, been on other aspects of his life. I don't want to really even get into all the discussions they talked about on the podcast, and it was the whole gamut of different thoughts. But there's going to be a question assuming Rodgers does sign, is there a concern? How does Mike Tomlin handle when Rodgers goes on McAfee or goes on Rogan or goes on whatever podcast to discuss some of those third rail topics, political, medicine, all the stuff they talked about? Does Tomlin try to put his thumb on the scale? We know he's famously someone who said, let the people, let personality shine through and be whoever you want to be. I'm not going to control that kind of stuff, but it certainly does create a lot of headlines, a lot of controversy. Is that a consideration for Pittsburgh when they're pursuing Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think. I mean, a guy that's been around the league that long, that's got that much clout, if you will. I don't think they're going to put any type of thumb on him.
Okay. So even no matter what he says, Pittsburgh's just going to try to
Yeah,
let that be a media story.
yeah. I mean, I imagine that he would keep showing up on McAfee, and then obviously have his weekly, whatever day they choose for him to meet the media, as a member of the Steelers for the starting quarterback day, and then obviously whenever he's post game comments and all like that. I don't imagine that he's going to be too media friendly as a whole. If you go back over the years, the last several years, post game interviews and things like that, especially with the Jets and all like that. He's just been kind of direct and to the point, it felt like, for the most part. Now there was the whole Mike the Mike Williams comment, was that seemed like that was a Jets press conference, wasn't it? Or was that McAfee?
No, that was a post game. That was right after the
Right.
loss to Buffalo, where Rodgers made the initial comment.
Yeah, I think he is who he is at this point. I don't think the Steelers are going to try to put a thumb on him. Uh, you know, uh, depending on how deep he goes, some maybe on there might be stuff behind closed doors. Man, can lay? I just don't see Mike Tomlin as getting interfering in that aspect of it.
I don't either, for the simple fact, if you sign Aaron Rodgers, you understand what you're getting. You
Mhm.
understand the player and the person, and he's going to say some things that may be controversial and maybe things you don't agree with, but you know that going into it. It's not going to be surprised if he goes on McAfee talking about COVID or whatever the case is. So, yeah, I think Pittsburgh's not going to try to control that or change that because that's who he is. That's what you're signing up for.
Yep, I agree.
Now, some have tried to compare it to Ben's radio show, and I don't think there's a comparison there. Ben's radio show, what was even like the most controversial thing Ben ever even said? Maybe the AD stuff that kind of started that whole situation. But that
Yeah, yeah. What was that? Following was that the interception against the Broncos or something? I don't
I
remember.
think
Uh, and look, I don't think Aaron's going to be shy about saying someone didn't run the right route, or someone missed an assignment, and all like that. But Ben never really got highly political. I don't think. There
or
was the
never.
whole. I guess there was the whole national anthem, Villanueva thing. It's been so long ago that even the details of that kind of have escaped my mind at this point.
that was less about Ben as it was just the team and in the climate in that moment, I think. So yeah, I mean, to me, there is no comparison between Rodgers and Ben's media interviews. And this isn't to judge it one way or the other, but it's just to say those are apples and oranges in terms of the substance of the commentary.
And look, I mean, this fan base, regardless, is going to be assuming Rodgers does sign, and even before there, I mean, you got the fan base pretty much split as it is, just because of Rodgers' political and conspiracy opinions and all like that, and that's not going to change after the fact. You're going to have half or a little under half that are happy that Rodgers is in Pittsburgh, and probably the other half not happy just from his world views standpoint.
Right, but if he plays well and Pittsburgh wins, the people who might normally not be happy with him probably can tolerate that more, and I'm sure the team would feel the same way. So the question is, what happens? You sign Rodgers, the team doesn't play too well, and he's still going on
Right.
McAfee, and it just becomes, you get no benefit. You're not getting the good play, and you're getting kind of the story distraction headlines of everything else.
When the team's not winning, most fans don't want players doing any interviews.
Right.
They want them at the facility working out 23 of 24 hours a day, right?
Right, right. So interesting to see how things go, but just wanted to make the comment about him being on Rogan. Again, really no football talk at all, but this was his second media appearance this year, and so it's worth noting that at the least, and just to make the next leap of, this is what you're potentially signing up for and likely signing up for whenever and if you do sign Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get some of these stories from Mike Florio and from just Twitter and online in general of Aaron Rodgers said this thing, and there's going to be a reaction to it.
Boy, Mike Florio really has, he's not afraid to go down those type of rabbit holes at this point. For pro football talk. In fact, I think he kind of thrives on trying to create that kind of stuff. And some of the stuff that he has said over the last couple of years, and his speculation has really gone more. Man, do you really have your finger on the pulse? I'm not just talking the political stuff. I'm just talking about the speculation of players and contracts and signing. And now look, there's nobody better at getting some contract details pushed out of some of these high-end contracts before anybody else. He's obviously got connections that way. This just isn't the same Mike Florio that it used to be, several years ago, I don't think.
Yeah, my thought on Florio is there can be some things he's really good at. I think anytime you're getting into that legal aspect in football, I remember when the Washington Commander sale went on, he was really good on that and kind of outlining the situation there. And there's some times where I think that perspective can be refreshing, but there's never been a conspiracy or contrarian thought Mike Florio didn't like, and so that's kind of my thought on him. There's certainly a lot more misses than hits when it comes to his speculation.
Here's the biggest thing where it comes to Aaron Rodgers right now and the pushback. You say that you got a lot of things going on in your personal life and you're having to sew that up, but yet you're still coming on Pat McAfee to address rumors that you claim that you don't follow none of that stuff, but you have some in your inner circle that do, and you thought that you'd take the time to put all that BS aside, and then on top of it, you're going on Joe Rogan. You got 3 hours to put aside on that, and you show up at these concerts, and I think he was even at a Taylor Swift concert not long ago. I don't. It just the optics don't set well with a fan base, especially for a fan base waiting to find out what your decision is going to be when you're out there claiming that you got a lot of things going on in your personal life, and that's why you haven't sewed all this up. But you're still in the public eye, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, he's been out of the public eye for most of the offseason, and he can still have personal things going on, and I want to give that grace and respect that. But it's just to say that you can do both. You can still make a decision on your football future and handle those personal things. To your point, the optics I think are bad. I can't be at OTAs because I have personal things going on, but I can go on Joe Rogan. I can fly to Texas and do the show there. I can go to that concert. I think certainly he's I'm not criticizing him for going to a concert and having personal things in his life. Everyone has things going on in their life, and everyone is able to balance, life and work and the sorrow and the pleasure, all that kind of stuff. That's fine, but it is another to sit there and say, well, I can't go to OTAs because I have personal things going on as I'm doing these other outwardly public things. And so, yeah, to me, I think Rodgers has to be there for OTAs, for mini camp, be with the team, put his hand in the pile, be ready to work, and assume the mantle of this team's, leader and starting quarterback for 2025.
And if Adam Schefter obviously doesn't have a great relationship with Aaron Rodgers, but it seems like daily we're reporting so and so reports they think Aaron Rodgers will be there by X date, and I think the latest report from Adam Schefter is soon, as in potentially next week.
But are these even reports, or is it just dot connecting and speculation? Yeah, these don't even feel like these are reports. I don't think anybody really has an actual source on what Rodgers' plan is. It just logically, if he is going to sign, you would think he'd be there at least by the mandatory minicamp, but they've been predicting Rodgers will sign since the Wednesday of free agency back in mid-March, and those dates have come and gone. So I take all that stuff with a big grain of salt.
Yep. So now we just sit and wait. How many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of the Tootsie Pop at this point? I think
Nobody
we have
knows.
satisfied. I think we have satisfied our Aaron Rodgers quota for this show.
We have Alex Highsmith, just to put a final bow on that, was on the Insiders on NFL Network yesterday, was asked about Aaron Rodgers, gave a very diplomatic answer. Would be excited to have him. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the best to ever do it. But we're also excited about Mason Rudolph, and we know what he's able to offer this team. So the only point to make there is that if Rodgers has not made a decision by Tuesday when OTA start, and the majority of players are in Pittsburgh for voluntary practices, that's all that's going to be asked of them is, what is your thought on Rodgers? Who do you want to be your quarterback? Is Rodgers coming? Do you know anything? These players know nothing. They're in the dark. They don't know what the heck's, and it's not a critique. It's just no one's telling them what's happening with Aaron Rodgers. So that is a short preview, Highsmith being asked 2-3 questions about Rodgers in a 5-minute interview. That's going to be copy and pasted throughout all of OTAs, all the spring work until there is finality on Rodgers' decision.
Especially when it comes to the guys that have kind of tenured on the team, the Cam Haywards, the TJ Watts, the even Mason Rudolph was asked on the Kabali Mac show about it. And yeah, it's going to, until he makes a decision, it will be something that players and coaches will be asked about.
Right, and that's Rodgers putting these guys in an awkward, difficult situation when I think it could be solved by now. Again, I want to try to give Rodgers grace and understand there were personal things, and I can understand that and respect that. First time free agent at 41 years old, it's a big decision to make. Do I want to play? Do I want to put myself through another season? I get all that, but there's got to be a deadline. There's got to be a time where we just sit there and say, we've given you some time. We've worked with you. Now you have to work with us. And I think that deadline should be next week.
I'm just ready for it to all be over with and have been for a while.
You, me, and everybody else, I'm sure, listening right now. All right, Dave, let's go to some NFL matters. We had a pretty lengthy discussion on the Wednesday show about the Tush push, and I thought it was going to get banned, that they were going to, basically, that they were going to pass that resolution that would have banned pushing teammates forward and lifting players. It failed by 2 votes, 22-10. 22 teams voted in favor of banning the Tush push, adopting that resolution, but you need 24 votes to pass. Pittsburgh voted to ban it, which they were on record saying previously, so that's not a big shock. But the Tush push lives on for at least one more year.
Yeah, I thought maybe they would find a way to get that pushed through.
Push through.
Yeah, hate to use the pun there, but they didn't. And so now we'll see another year. I did kind of caveat that, kind of wondering, about from the injury aspect, and to hear Art Rooney, I guess, talk. He kind of thought with Jason Kelsey, kind of maybe his presence there and talking, helped kind of maybe sway some people into not voting for banning it, if you will. But long story short, it's going to be around another year, and if you want to stop it, the best way to stop it is just to stop it. But I mean, it's hard. That's obviously easier said than done when it comes to that. Don't, or at the very least, don't give them an opportunity to use the tush push. Don't let Philadelphia get in those 3rd and short, 4th and short situations, and you don't have to deal with it. So that's the best way to combat that kind of stuff.
Agreed. Now, for Pittsburgh, there's been some discussion. Should the Steelers use the tush push more? They have used it in some small pockets in time. I don't even think really much this past year, maybe once, but I think in previous years they had dabbled in it. Is this something Pittsburgh should be looking to incorporate more heavily into their short yardage package? They were a terrible short yardage team last season, 29th in the NFL. Should they be taking advantage of the fact this play will exist for at least one more season?
My viewpoint on this, it kind of rolls back to how about just get the damn first down, however you need to get the first down, short yardage wise, or don't get yourself in positions where you have to maybe potentially kind of worry about that stuff.
Well, you're going to naturally be in some 3rd
Sure.
and 4th and 1
Yeah,
situations.
how about just blow them off the damn line and run the damn football right up the middle and get the first down with your running back,
Sure, but couldn't that you can do both? You can do tush push in some situations and a traditional dive in others.
Right, but here's the thing. I'm having a hard time visualizing Aaron Rodgers being part of several tush pushes or wanting to be.
Sure,
and then you get into the slippery slope of some of these beat writers saying, "Well, get Darnell Washington back there, give him some reps." Hey, here's the end all do all. Just figure out a way to get the damn first down. Whatever to play.
Agreed. And right, to your point, I was playing a little devil's advocate a second ago with Rodgers and then Rudolph as your backup and starter. If Rodgers does not sign, that's not your tush push guy. And so Pittsburgh would have the more difficult challenge of trying to find somebody to do it. I mean, they did it with Kenny Pickett a little bit, maybe with Justin Fields one time. Did they do it with Russ at all? Did they do a tush push with Russ in his half a season? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head if they did. They didn't do it a lot. And look, anytime you have a non-positional player, you have and how many reps are you going to dedicate that to throughout the season? Sure, you might dedicate some of it during. I mean, will you even replicate that during training camp? How many tush pushes did you see during training camp over the last 2 or 3 years?
0. The only time they're even working like true short yardage is the goal line drill they do usually later in training camp, and it's never a quarterback sneak. It's usually a running back dive or boot or something like that. But that's the only time you get into real close quarters action.
I mean, how many times do you really want to see Darnell Washington lined up under center doing the tush push?
None. And also, if you have Darnell doing the, I guess, tushing, then who does the pushing? You want some big people behind to help push the quarterback forward. So yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't advocate for putting non-quarterbacks. I mean, we have occasionally across the NFL seen tight ends do it. The Chiefs have done it with Blake Bell a couple of years ago, Noah Gray. I'm just not there on the risk for a non-quarterback to do it. You could suggest, though, Will Howard, who's a big guy that's strong. The issue, though, is that if he's your 3rd-string quarterback, your emergency quarterback, which is what he would be if Rodgers is your number 1, Rudolph your number 2, Howard can't come into the game unless those 2 quarterbacks are hurt. And so there's a difficulty logistically in getting him onto the field.
Exactly. For an emergency quarterback to enter the game, the first 2 have to be injured and can't come back.
Right. So you would either have to have Howard not as your emergency designated quarterback, which means someone else would have to be inactive, or Howard as your number 2 or something like that. So I think the tush push has value, and I'm in favor of keeping it as a play. So I'm glad the resolution failed. It was interesting because usually resolutions the NFL votes on do not fail, because when they bring these things to vote, they expect it to pass. It's bad optics for the NFL to bring something that fails like that. It truly was one of the more interesting situations we've seen in a vote in a long, long time. But yeah, I don't know if Pittsburgh's really in position to utilize it.
I think there's just too much focus, and it's an easy target because of the time of the offseason, because of the topical nature of the discussion as whole of saying, okay, well, they didn't ban it. Now, how can the Steelers take advantage of that. I just go back to just figure out your damn short yardage situation and get better all the way around in short yardage situations, and your success rates will go up as an offense as a whole.
Yeah, you have Jalen Warren, you have Caleb Johnson, bigger backs, guys who should be able to get a yard for an offensive line you've invested in. You should be able to get a yard. You can also just do a regular quarterback sneak too. It's not like that's
Right.
you can't do that either if you really had a mind about it in a certain situation or so. So
You
yeah,
see where I'm going with this? There's just too much
sure.
discussion about, okay, well, this one play that you might use 3 or 4. Obviously, the Eagles seem to use it a little bit more, but I mean, there's too much discussion about how do you tailor this unique situation to an aspect of the game that you should always be trying to be better at, anyways.
How does Pittsburgh overall get better in short yardage situations? Because it was a big ISO. Remember the Cleveland game last year? I mean, there were some real ugly situations where Pittsburgh just simply could not gain a yard.
I mean, it all starts up front, right? You got to get more. Your offensive line's got to have a better push. You got to have a running back hit in the hole. I mean, we could spend an hour and a half on that very topic, I guess. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, you just got to find a way to get better. I don't care if it's a tush push. I don't care, how you. I don't know, quick. However, even through the air or whatever, you just get better at it.
Especially for a team who wants to be physical, wants to run the ball, fourth in rushing attempts last year, you better be able to be a team that can win in those tight quarters, short yardage moments. And Pittsburgh really struggled to do so last year. So yeah, the tush push, I'm not banging the table for Pittsburgh to implement in any meaningful way. Also, I know the tush push ban failed this year, but they're going to ban that play eventually. It's going to be a sooner or later, situation on that. If they were 2 votes shy, think eventually they're going to have the votes to ban it. So I wouldn't expect
Especially
this
if you
play
have
to
an
be long.
injury happen related to it.
Oh yeah, the first major injury that occurs, even if it is just by random chance, and the data overall says it's a safe play, the first major injury is going to bring that resolution back up in a heartbeat the next year, and that play is going to get banned. So I think it's truly, it's year by year for tush push, and I wouldn't be surprised if by 2026 the play was officially outlawed.
Yeah, if I'm an NFL team, I'm not chasing my tail around trying to uh, tailor things towards this one rule.
Especially for just the construction of Pittsburgh roster. If they had a Jalen Hurts type of quarterback, then yeah, I'm all for it. But they don't have that situation right now with Rodgers and Rudolph and the difficulty of getting Howard on the field. So not something I'm, like I said, banging the table to achieve.
All right.
Dave, you wanted to mention this was some really sad news that came across Wednesday afternoon, evening, that Jim Irsay, the longtime owner of the Indianapolis Colts, had passed away at the age of 65. I did not realize he was that young, and so that was obviously a shock. One of the more eclectic and true kind of free spirit, tell you exactly how he feels type of owners, kind of an old school owner in that sense, Al Davis type that isn't going to sugarcoat things, not going to toe the company line, going to tell you exactly what he thinks and feels. And so, very sad news there for Jim Irsay in the football community.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looked a lot older than his actual age, and I can say that because I'm up in age at this point. But you look at the actual age of 65, and here I am. What am I, 57 now? And that's obviously not too far away. I just, the guy was a very colorful guy. You knew who he was as a fan of the another team. I always admired the musical interest that Irsay had. Huge guitar collection. Obviously, very active in the mental health and aspect of the legacy that he leaves behind, as far as that goes. And I think a lot of people are aware of the kind of the drug and alcohol issues that he's battled over the years. I certainly do hope that when all this comes back, that it's maybe not related to something like that. Maybe it was just a hard kind of in between years that kind of added up on him. But yeah, just I think just not even 12 hours before, he had to tweet out about wishing the Pacers good luck in the playoffs, and it did. Was he at the owners' meetings? That's one thing that I can't. Was he even present for any of that? I would imagine he was, wasn't he, or no?
I would imagine too. I don't know for sure, but I don't believe I had heard that he was absent from those.
All right. I did since read a lot about his, I think, three daughters and kind of how the ownership will go with them. And he's got the one daughter that seems to be very well versed and ready for this role. So I did do a little bit of reading up just because it's interesting. Uh, of how that ownership's going to go moving forward there. But yeah, very, very sad news when it comes to Irsay passing away, especially with the Irsay name and how long they've been involved, and I guess the whole Colts leaving Baltimore and how that all played out. And I think overall he was good for the game.
I agree, and somebody that's a very interesting story became owner of the Colts in his mid to late 30s. I believe. I think he was 37 when he took over ownership of the Colts, which is a big undertaking, obviously, for somebody that was so young at the time. Just my overall thought, and it may feel like such a low bar, but in this day and age, I think it's something still worth mentioning and celebrating. Was he was a guy that, from my understanding, cared about his players. Wasn't just the owner in name, just to collect the check or say he was the owner of the team to be that big wig status symbol. He was somebody who truly cared about the guys on the roster when they were Colts and even in their post Colts career. Pat McAfee discussing whenever he retired, him having a 2-hour conversation with Irsay and Irsay telling him, if you ever need a job, you always have a place here in Indy. You're a Colt forever. And so the owners that can truly show that level of care and interest and compassion for their players are the owners I respect the most. And Jim Irsay was one of those one of those
Yeah,
owners.
yeah, and I think you had a wife of either of, I think it might have been a former player, come out and said they kind of a low interest loan to help save a farm or a property or something like that, and was notorious for giving out $100 bills, I guess, to fans at training camp and sending fans to the Super Bowl. Just very philanthropic overall, real giving guy. I think is the takeaway that you get from reading and hearing all these stories about Jim Irsay.
For sure, always appreciate somebody with a giving spirit, and Jim Irsay certainly had that in spades. So will be missed, and that was very surprising news. All right, Dave, no, it's a tough transition, but the last topic I think we wanted to talk about today was the Pittsburgh Steelers salary cap update with Harmon signed, the undrafted rookie free agent signing bonuses in now known and finalized. Give us an update where Pittsburgh stands financially.
Yeah, not shouldn't come as a shock overall because we've kind of known about with these slotted contracts and all what's a lot of these would be, what the impact would be on the salary cap. The only thing, the small amounts related to the signing bonuses of the undrafted free agents. Obviously, we had to kind of wait on not knowing what the total would be there. But where I have them right now, as far as their rule of 51 number goes, I have them 32,400,000 under the cap right now. And that's obviously a large number that does not take into account the CBA offseason workout bonus charge placeholder amount of nearly $1 million that is yet to be instituted. When the real number does finally come in, it should be well under the placeholder amount of 907,200. But from a raw perspective, as where we sit right now, 32.4 million under the cap right now. And obviously, you got to look ahead at some of the expenditures coming. Just mentioned a workout bonus charge, the end of the rule of 51 for the 52nd and 53rd player, the practice squad, which will total out probably slightly over 4 million. How much are you going to have in off-season injury settlements with these guys that get waived injured and then revert to IR? That's probably going to be somewhere around 500,000. How much will this team require themselves to have as far as an injury replacement, basically salary cap room to start the season with for transactions, elevations? I've got that estimated at around 6 million. And then look, you got a huge elephant in the room. I hate to continue to go back to Aaron Rodgers here, but assuming Aaron Rodgers does sign, what will that contract look like? What will the 25 salary cap charge end up being. I think it's realistic to at least put a range out there of anywhere from 10 to 25 million dollars, just because we don't know. Sure, we have the Aaron Rodgers comments about I'd play for 10 million, but he's not playing for 10 million until he actually signs a contract that says he's playing for 10 million. So, that's up in the air. Obviously, the Steelers can afford that. A byproduct later on in the offseason that I know a lot of people thinking the Steelers shouldn't do it, but there's no reason to believe at this point in time that the Steelers won't ultimately sign TJ Watt to a contract extension at some point between now and week 1. And assuming they do, and assuming it's a top of the market type of contract extension, such an extension would potentially free up around $9 million or so in salary cap space that way. So you've got two large variables, unknown variables that you're working with here in an Aaron Rodgers contract, in a TJ Watt extension. That obviously could impact the amount of salary cap room. Now, we've talked about what's going to happen with Chris Boswell. Will they push some money forward? Even if they do, that's not going to impact cash or cap spending significantly at that point. So, there's not a lot to really talk about there. We've talked about, will they sign a guy like Deshaun Elliott to a contract extension? Even if they do that, I don't think you're seeing a huge shift in need of salary cap space for this year. So I think it all boils back down to what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, what's an extension for TJ Watt look like. And I think the crux of this is, and a lot of people don't prefer not to spend a lot of time on here, Alex, is the cash. What does the cash spending say when it comes to the Steelers, at this point of the offseason, now that we have the draft pick signed, the undrafted guys signed, the roster, for greater lack of the word, or greater lack of talking, is set, albeit, not knowing who the franchise quarterback is going to be. As far as what I think that this team's going to spend, I think there's still at least another $41 million out there in cash that this team's going to spend. And cash does not equal cap dollars go. And, if you look at that, you say, man, how in the hell is this team going to spend at least another $41 million in cash? Well, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is going to eat up a chunk of that. Anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 25 million. I think it's realistic that probably somewhere close to an additional $20 million above and beyond what TJ Watt is already scheduled to earn in cash for 2025 would go towards that. So, long story short, if you look at just from the cash perspective and projecting what you think the Steelers are going to spend in relation to the league's cap number, there's no way that they don't sign TJ Watt to a contract extension, and they're going to have a huge hole if they don't sign Aaron Rodgers to some sort of contract. I mean, even if it's $10 million for 2025, you're coming up short some cash spending that way, and that's even taken into account really pushing some money ahead for Chris Boswell. Let's say you signed Deshaun Elliott to a contract extension. None of those are going to make that huge of a mark overall that's going to eliminate this huge cash spending windfall that I expect the Steelers to make the rest of the summer. Now, you could say, well, okay, Dave, I'm in favor of not signing Aaron Rodgers. I'm in favor of not signing TJ Watt to a contract extension. If that's your point of view at this point, fine. Fine. I get that. The only thing is you still, as a team, have to spend at least 90% of the 3-year cap number in cash. This team fell short of that last year. If they don't make up some of that this year, then you're going to go into the third year, the final year of the 3-year CBA period, really having to make up a lot of ground as far as cash goes. And I know a lot of people listening say, fine, go out and spend it. Go out, go hog heavy on free agency. But I mean, you're putting yourself in a corner that of having to spend that. And I don't think the Steelers want to put themselves in a position where they have to go out absolutely and just go hog wild in cash spending, especially if it's not for a veteran quarterback. You would have to do this via free agency, for lack of a better word, and you might have to dole out some contracts to some guys, say Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton, that maybe, depending on what happens this year, you don't really want to put yourself in a position to have to do so. So I can't stress enough how much people need to learn the cash spending aspect side of the business, related to the salary cap number. And that's why I feel like I have a cheat code here, for lack of a better word, saying that there's no way around not giving TJ Watt a contract extension this offseason. And at some point, you're going to have to sign a quarterback, be it Aaron Rodgers, or trade for one and Kirk Cousins to help make up for some of this cash spending that you need to do.
But isn't that the same concern if you sit there and say, well, you can't put all your chips in the next year's basket because then you feel like you're forced to do things. But then we're sitting here saying, well, you kind of feel forced to pay a quarterback and forced to pay TJ Watt, so you don't put yourself in that cash do or die situation next year. So isn't it the same situation to say whether you're spending the cash this year or next year, you're doing it almost out of obligation as much as want to?
Well, here's the thing too. If you don't sign, let's say you just leave TJ Watt's contract as is, you're already running into a cash because of what the new contract would be and what his base salary would be for next year. You're already creating a cash shortage spending that way as well. The long story short, they didn't do a good enough job drafting throughout this process and have enough people that were eligible for lucrative contract extensions this offseason.
Sure, because Pickett's long gone and Pickens has been traded. But I think I'm just playing again devil's advocate. But if you sit there and say, well, you got to pay TJ Watt this year and you got to go sign Aaron Rodgers because if not, you're in that cash situation next year where you have to spend it. It's the same thing. It's just a commentary of, do you spend the cash now or do you spend the cash later? So if someone says TJ Watt isn't worth it or Aaron Rodgers isn't worth it, and you sit there and say, well, they kind of have to do it because they got to spend the cash. It's the same argument you're making. If you don't sign those guys this year and you got to spend the cash on who knows who in 2026.
Yeah, but at least you have a better idea of who you can and spend the cash on this year. And whereas it's more of an unknown a year from now, and especially if you don't sign TJ Watt, you're creating look, teams don't just run this like I run it on a spreadsheet and wait for the NFLPA to update their public salary cap sheet. They've got 3, 5, 7-year plans, I would think. Overall, they have a better idea how much they expect the salary cap to increase. They know what cap dollars versus cash dollars are worth today versus tomorrow, if you will. Tomorrow meaning next year. So you've got to kind of plan this stuff out. And I just don't view the Steelers as a organization that want to get themselves in a even big, because look, the cap goes up every year, right? And the cash relegated to that in the 90% rule. You have to have all this worked out more than a year advance, at least some semblance of a plan. And I firmly believe that TJ Watt is part of that plan.
I agree. I'm just arguing on the side of your fan saying they shouldn't pay TJ Watt because he's simply not worth that money. There's too much risk for a guy in his 30s who's battling injuries, coming off, by his lofty standards, a down year. It's just not the right move to sign him. And you're saying, well, if you don't, then you're really in a cash unique situation where you have to spend like crazy next year. And I think the argument some people would say is you're making that argument about needing to pay TJ Watt. The point is you should never have to pay a guy because you feel like you need to pay a guy out of cash responsibility to fulfill that 90% rule. And I think some would argue that Pittsburgh may be doing that by pursuing Rodgers this year by extending TJ Watt. I'm not necessarily making that argument, but I think that is an argument to be made.
But here's the crux of it. You have to spend at least 90%. So you automatically have to spend the cash.
Right. No, I understand that. Yeah. But you're saying that should not be the reason why you extend TJ Watt. That should not be the reason why you sign Aaron Rodgers.
Look, I mean, yeah, you're signing TJ Watt, because you trust that he's worth the value of it anyway. I'm not saying that if TJ Watt was coming off of, a serious knee injury or a very, very, very down year and it looks like he's lost it. Yeah, you don't want to get yourself in that type of situation where, well, we got to do it regardless. But I mean, it's a logical, justifiable cash expense.
No, I understand that. But whenever you said you were responding to the people that say, don't extend TJ Watt, don't sign Aaron Rodgers. And your point basically was, well, you have to spend that cash, correct?
I mean, you almost have to unless you want to get yourself in a situation where you're going to be in a larger hole where you have to spend even more cash next year.
Right. So my point is it's the same argument of either you feel like you have to spend the cash now or you feel like, and you will in fact have to spend the cash next year. That's the argument. It makes sense.
There's semantics in here though, but
no, it's not semantics. It's just, I'm saying some would argue that paying TJ Watt now, it feels like it's out of obligation to fulfill the 90% rule, which would be the same thing.
Well, it is because the player's worth. Well, at least in our, some listening would say, well, he's not worth it.
Right. That's the other side of it. Now, again, you have to pay players because they're worth paying them. If not, then you're just making bad decisions.
Right. But you're more apt to, especially when it comes to outside, not even know how free agency is going to go next year. You're more apt to make an even worse cash spending decision a year from now if you don't make a more educated, safer spend this year.
I agree, and that's a fair take on it. But I'm just looking at it from that other perspective. When we talk about extending a player, signing a player, it should never be in any scope, in my opinion. We have to fulfill the 90% rule. I know you have to, and that has something that has to be calculated and addressed, and make sure that you are fulfilling that. But it should always be about the player more so than we have to do it for cash reasons, whether that's extending a TJ Watt or signing a free agent next year.
Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying overpay players.
Yeah, I'm not accusing or arguing that you are doing that. Although I do think, what did you commit on Watts? Do you think he will end up topping Myles Garrett's contract?
It's going to be right there. I mean, I don't know. If I'm TJ Watt, there's no way I don't come away from this higher than. Now here's the whole thing. There's aspects of, there's the APY, right? The average per year. Then there's the guaranteed money, and then there's the cash flow. Those are all measurements that these guys look at and all. And I imagine Watt's going to want to be on top of Garrett on at least two of those three.
APY for sure, at the very least, because that is the thing that gets talked about in media circles. That's how players are generally publicly sorted, even though the devil in the details often matters more. But I really have a hard time believing APY-wise, Watt comes in below Myles Garrett, so we're talking above $40 million per year.
Right, and this all goes back to why didn't the Steelers get a jump on this earlier in the offseason when they knew that they had to spend the money. They knew that they were going to have to get a deal done with them. They knew the others out there at the position that they were competing against market value wise. Why didn't you just get it done earlier? And that would allow you to maybe even to spend more cash this offseason on maybe a higher quality free agent or two.
Yeah, Watt would have been paid less, probably $35 million per year. The contract would have been done. There's no thought about, will he be at OTAs or will he hold in again, or will this be a story and a distraction as we're getting ready for a really important 2025 season? And now Pittsburgh has put themselves in that position. And I know some will say that maybe Watt intentionally decided to wait, knowing the market would heat up and he could then jump Garrett. And that is possible. I don't get the sense that was the case, though. Historically, Pittsburgh waits to do deals. They don't typically jump on deals early. And I don't think Watt really wanted to have another drawn out summer contract saga the way that he did in 2021, where he got frustrated and basically went to Rooney's office and said, let's just get this deal done. I want to go out there and put this behind us and get ready for the season. I don't think Watt was so greedy that he would want to have to play that waiting game for a couple extra $1 million.
Right. I agree. But I mean, I still think that I have the cheat code here because I understand how the organization works, and has done this historically, and I also know the financials related to all this, and what there are because of what happened last year with the cash spending, and how I just don't view this as an organization that wants to have to make up a huge cash spending windfall in the final year if they can help it.
No, I agree. And I've talked about that concern before, where if you get in that position where you feel like, and you literally have to pay players to reach that bar, then you start making bad decisions. But I like to try to keep the conversation about we're paying TJ Watt because he is worth the money, not because we have to hit this target financially.
Right. Look, obviously, once again, if the player's not worth the money, you shouldn't get yourself in a position where you have to spend the money, but he's worth the money.
Right. So what is your response in short to somebody who says they should not pay TJ Watt? He is not worth the money.
They don't understand the market value and the economics of positionally paying players top of the market, and the negotiation factor of you're just not going. You might, if you think TJ Watt's only worth 30 million, good luck getting him to agree to that.
Okay, fair. I wanted to distill that down into a couple sentence answers. So gotcha.
I mean, just because, certain people listening to this show don't think he's worth more than 25 or 30 million, that's their own personal view. The fact of the matter is his value's much higher than that.
Yeah, the market
Just the
dictates.
economics, and you just are not going to slide a contract. Oh, he should take 30 million and be fine with it. That's not how it works.
Right. It's market forces. Brock Purdy is not probably truly worth 53 million per year. He's probably not the fifth best quarterback or wherever he's slotting based off his APY, but that is market forces, and that's why Watt will get paid more than maybe what some people think he should get paid.
Right, and that's why I think there's been other than one Instagram post that people speculated that didn't mean jack. I don't. It might have just been Watt. You could boil it down to why didn't you get? He might be just trying to send some sort of subtle signal that I don't like the way that this has gone so far, and I think I should be done by now. I know I'm going to get done, but I think I should be done by now. Why are you waiting?
Well, and then I guess if that was the case, it means something. But I didn't do anything. He hasn't been paid yet, and that story's 6 weeks old at this point. So it didn't put the pressure, I guess, that if it was intended to do so, it did not work. And there was never a single concrete report that said TJ Watt is unhappy with his status and situation. You can infer it from that. You can infer that because Watt never clarified that, hey, that wasn't what I was trying to do. I just posted a cool photo of myself, maybe. But there was never an actual report that said TJ Watt is unhappy with his contract situation or the status of the team's negotiations.
Right, and in your heart of heart, in your heart of hearts, do you think Watt in his heart of hearts is worried about this getting done eventually?
No, I think he understands it will get done. But I do think he's going to sit there and say, is this going to be another situation that does not get resolved until the 11th hour, like 2021? And he's probably not happy about that because he wasn't happy about it last time.
Sure, and I would firmly expect him to take it easy during training camp until something gets done.
Do you think he holds in the way he held in before, where he did some work on the side? I remember that training camp. It was the one at Acrisure. I think it was still Heinz Field then, where he did a little bit of work on the side, but he was never in pads. He never practiced fully with the team.
Sure.
So you think he will hold in similar to 2021 again in 2025?
Yeah.
Okay. That's certainly possible.
But I tell you, I do think that there's really, especially once they get this, assuming they get something done with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, what's left at that point? I mean, they obviously should have had it done by now, in my opinion, but there's no reason come the start of training camp that you're not opening up training camp announcing a new deal for TJ Watt.
Michael Parsons, though, he could get paid here any second, which will
Sure.
change things a little bit more. And if the issue with Rodgers is not money, and based on what Rodgers has said, and based on reporting that Pittsburgh's had a contract offer out to him since March, then couldn't you? What's stopping you from getting a Watt deal done if you know the parameters of the Rodgers contract?
Yeah. I mean, timing's everything with these things, negotiations. But they would be smart to not even put themselves in a position to put TJ Watt in a position where he's having to just do stuff on the side.
Right. So why isn't the deal getting done now? Why is this team seemingly waiting? Maybe it'll get it done in June. That does seem to be a time when Omar Khan has gotten some deals done in the past. Post get through OTAs, get through mandatory minicamp, make sure everyone's healthy. Then you do a deal in late June. But why not get a deal done now with Parsons potentially signing a contract at any moment?
Right. But it does take two sides to get a deal done, though.
It does. It does. And I'm sure that's back and forth. And the Garrett situation has. Do you think the Garrett situation has made things significantly more difficult for Pittsburgh to get a deal done?
No, because I think they foresaw that coming.
Do you think they saw $40 million coming?
Yeah, I think they did.
I wonder if they did. Because for a time, I thought Garrett was good as gone. I thought he was going to be traded by Cleveland. Like, how do you keep this guy? He wants out.
If he wasn't going to get it from them, he's going to get it from somebody else, though.
Do you think he would have gotten $40 million from somebody else who traded first-round picks for him?
I think so, yeah.
It felt like Cleveland had to pay a little more through the nose to get Garrett to stay. That he couldn't just get 35.5 and top Crosby to stay. He had to not only be the highest paid defensive end pass rusher, but dramatically reset the market to convince Garrett to stay because he wanted out. And why did he stay? Because he got paid a bunch of money.
I think that was all just done shenanigans anyway, just to get himself in a position to get that money. Look, there's people that it's their jobs to address market value related to the cap and positional and all like that. So I don't see how they didn't see this coming. Okay, let's say it's 1 million higher.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. If they thought it was 37 or 40, I guess it's not changing the equation dramatically. But if they did see it coming, then that begs the question even more. Why didn't Watt deal get done even sooner?
Right, especially knowing that the situation that they were already entering the offseason with and what they spent cash last year, and knowing that at some point they're going to have to get Watt done, and knowing that there are going to be several edge rushers rushing to the altar and all like that. I mean, it's easy from an outsider here to think, just why didn't you get it done earlier in the offseason?
Yeah, I guess you could argue maybe that they thought they were going to spend more in free agency than they did. I mean, maybe you could argue that they wanted to get through the first wave of free agency and see what they spent to have a better lay of the land before they addressed Watt. I don't know, but I do think the Garrett situation has made things more complicated. I think a Watt extension gets done, and I do think it's hard to envision Watt taking a lesser APY than the $40 million that Garrett got.
All right. So once again, back to the cash versus cap. That's why current, where's my numbers here on the cash aspect here? I am expecting the Steelers to spend roughly around $286.2 million in cash this year, which is obviously above and beyond what the cap number is this year overall. And I think that would put them at something like 102.5% over this year's cap number in cash spending, which helps kind of offset what they didn't spend in the first year of the CBA. Now, at the very minimal, I would expect them to spend up to the cap number, which is what, 270. What is the cap? 279.2 million. So even if I'm off by 7 million, they're at least probably going to spend to the cap number in cash. And even that would make it a little bit tougher on next year, to get to at least a 9. And I still think that their goal is going to be for the 3-year period to spend 95% of the 3-year cap number in cash.
It'll be interesting because, like you said, you wouldn't expect Pittsburgh to go spend a bunch of money on quarterback next year, right? You're drafting a rookie. You're not going to be pursuing a high-paid veteran, I wouldn't think.
I wouldn't think, but obviously things change, but I would think, what, I guess there's always the option of signing Aaron Rodgers to a 2-year deal here. But even so, if he doesn't play good in year one, you're going to cut bait on that real quick.
True. And obviously, like you said, things can change. And could Pittsburgh, in theory, sign a Sam Darnold-like player to a 1-year, de facto 1-year contract and draft a rookie? They could. So you never know.
I mean, I guess the only other thing to really talk about here is who left on the roster. Could they potentially sign to a contract extension that would significantly move the needle for cash spending this year? They already, we've already talked about Deshaun Elliott. That even if you get something done there, that's not going to be a huge needle mover there. You cannot sign Joey Porter Jr. or Keanu Benton yet due to CBA rules. I suppose you could do something with Jalen Warren, but he's already got a cash expenditure of $5.346 million for this year. How much above and beyond that are you going to go? Yeah, okay. You give him an extra $3 million in cash this year. Let's say even an extra $5 million. You're not moving the needle much there. We've talked about pushing some money forward for Chris Boswell. That's not going to be a huge impact. Oh, there's nobody left to spend the money on. I mean, you already got Alex Highsmith locked up. You're not going to do anything with Cameron Hayward. I suppose you could go to, I mean, it would be out of the norm because Minka Fitzpatrick still has 2 years left on his contract. It doesn't feel like you're going to do anything there with him.
Who are the pending free agents next year, and assume that Watt gets re-signed this year?
The list of free agents for next year.
At least the most notable, but however you want to present it is fine.
Let's see. Darius Slay.
Okay.
Isaac Sayamalo, Jalen Warren, Miles Killebrew, Juan Thornhill, Cordell Patterson, Deshaun Elliott, Daniel Quale, Dean Lowry, Robert Woods, Cole Holcomb, Kenneth Gainwell, Isaiah Loudermilk, Scotty Miller. Oh, it just gets worse from there.
Yeah,
I mean, just stop me when you're done.
I'm done.
When you're ready.
Crying uncle over here. So yeah, there's not anybody on the horizon from a free agent standpoint expected to be re-signed or paid a lot of money if they are re-signed.
Now, obviously, not scheduled to be free agents next year. We just talked about them. Would be guys coming up in the final year of their rookie contracts. Guys like Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton. But how could you realistically? You probably have something sketched out right now. But what if these guys just go nuts, which you're obviously hoping that they do, or what if they on the other side just fall off the side of the cliff?
Right. So that's why I wanted to keep it on just the pending free agents. Of course, you could extend out the names you mentioned. Also, Darnell Washington could get an extension. Would not surprise me next year. But yeah, you're not seeing a clear path to spending a bunch of money internally next year either. Boswell not a free agent after next year?
Well, he's got 2 years. He's got this year and next year left. And that's why all the talk would be to not extend him this year, because it would kind of go against what the Steelers normally do with players 2 years left on their contract. That's why I think you'll see some money pushed forward for him some way, shape, or form. And they should.
Right, but then you're in extension talk next year with Boswell, right?
Yeah, and obviously that is going to depend how he performs and his age, and are you really going to go that route? And even if you did make Chris Boswell a year from now the top of the market kicker, I mean, how much cash are you even talking about then?
What is even the going rate for kickers?
What is it? $6 million or something right now as far as APY goes. You got Harrison Butker has an APY of $6.4 million, leads the list right now.
What was his first year cash flow on the deal that he signed?
When did he sign?
Which was last August, so pretty recent. It was
5 point. Let's see, last 2024, his cash due is 4.165. This year he's due 3.835 in cash. 2026 he's due 5.9 in cash.
All right, so yeah, not big numbers in the scope of the salary cap there.
Right. So, it becomes an afterthought. I
Yeah.
mean, it becomes something that you make a decision on, obviously, how Boswell does, and assuming the fact that they push money forward to him this year.
Right. All right, Dave. Good discussion there. Just good. Want to have a little back and forth on the salary cap situation.
They're going to find a way to spend at least $40 million more in cash from where we sit right now. I'm just, that's what the math says.
Yep, I'm with you. I agree, and that's likely on Watt and Aaron Rodgers. So we'll get those numbers when and if those contracts get done. More likely when, and go from there and update things probably closer to training camp and then before week 1 kicks off.
Look, I know people don't like this segment of talking. Everybody likes to talk about cap space, but people don't like to talk about cash is because they just don't understand the aspect of it. And that's why I try to hammer it home so much, is to help people understand, and why I've even been delving into it more these last 2 or 3 years since the the updated CBA and the 3-year spending, because I do firmly believe it gives you a better aspect of what a team's going to do going into to an off season, of how they're going to react from a cash spending aspect, especially from a team that's so predictable when it comes to the Steelers in cash spending and contracts and how they lay things out. So it's a very important, and I quite personally, I feel it gives me a hand up in kind of predicting some of this stuff. And people saying, oh, they need to trade TJ Watt, or they don't, they need to not pay him X money. Well, the math, other than TJ Watt going out and having something very unfortunate happen to him between now and the start of training camp, all everything just lines up, but that's the way it's going to go, whether you like it or not.
No, I understand. And I think it's really important that you lay that out, because you're right. We talk so much about the salary cap ceiling. We almost never, and I talk about this from a national media perspective, we almost never discuss the salary cap floor, which there very much is a floor that has to be understood and gets almost no lip service when it comes to these contract talks.
And you get the side stuff about talking about, oh, the Steelers are cheap and all like that. Teams can't be cheap up. They can be cheap and stick at the 90% of the 3-year cap number in cash, but teams are I think, and look, the league as a whole says the league has to spend 95%, and teams want, like it or not, teams want to come as close to that 95% number as possible, or else they're kind of frowned upon.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
If you're constantly a team that said, "Oh, I'm just going to spend the minimum there," well, that doesn't set a good precedent of trying to attract free agents down the line. So that's yet another reason why I think you'll see the Steelers come in around 95% in cash of a 3-year total, because that's what the league wants the league to be across the board. And 90% is just a minimum.
I agree, but I do want to reiterate from our last conversation. I think when teams talk, or fans talk about teams being cheap, it's less so about salary cap and more about other things in terms of facilities and coaches and the like.
I think where you get yourself in the biggest organizational area of falling short is, you don't want to go into that 3rd year having to overpay players just for the sheer fact we got to get a deal done with this, and over market value at that, not only to keep the player, but to help satisfy cash spending needs in the 3rd year of the CBA.
No, I get it. I mean, I've said that before. You don't want the cash tail to wag the dog, but and I don't want to sound like a broken record. I understand your point, Dave. They're going to extend TJ Watt. They're likely to sign Aaron Rodgers. They're likely to spend the $40 million of cash that you're talking about. But when you sit there and say a moment ago, you look at the math and sit there and say, well, TJ Watt's going to get paid because that's what the math is telling me. You're not wrong, but it's the same concern of you're paying a guy because that's what the math says you need to do, instead of leading with you're paying a TJ Watt because TJ Watt deserves to be paid.
Well, they both obviously go hand in hand. The player deserves it. It's what the market value is, and it's what you on paper at least feel like you have to spend.
I agree. I think it can be both, but I just from a devil's advocate perspective and to the point of you have to be you can't go all in and spend all your cash next year because you're going to make mistakes. You can't be driven by that. You're hearing that argument, I think, a little bit about paying a guy like TJ Watt this year too.
Well, people that don't have a firm understanding and are against the TJ Watt and the Aaron Rodgers thing, they're saying we'll worry about that next year, and we expect the team to go hog wild in free agency just to make that up.
Right, which is a very risky proposition to make as a franchise.
Right.
So anyway, I think yeah, we got to the point. So I'm not trying to beat you up, and I think we're on the same page here. I'm just trying to present the counter argument of those concerned about paying Watt this year, because some may get the sense it feels like it's an out of an obligation to spend the money now, so you're not putting yourself in that position next year. But by that same token, you are then still spending money now because it feels like an obligation more so than a true desire and want, and this is in the best interest of the team.
Look, imagine having 3 puzzles all dumped in your lap, all the pieces spread out, and nobody gives you the box covered and to know what you're trying to build with the picture here. You have got to in each year of this thing at least put enough of the puzzle together that at least paints you a clear enough picture of what you're trying to work forward to try to build. If you just did this on a willy-nilly year by year basis, it makes it extremely hard to just go piece by piece with this and say we'll worry about the rest of the puzzle when there's a deadline to get the puzzle done.
Agreed, and that's not how teams operate, because they have to have these 3-year, 5-year plans. You're 100% right about that. Do you think teams should employ more salary cap personnel? It feels like, at least in Pittsburgh, there's 2 guys, kind of, sort of, 1.5. It's Omar Khan, who now wears the GM hat, and so he's a pretty busy man, and Cole Marcoux, who now is running Khan's old role as kind of the quote-unquote salary cap guy. For something so complex and so heavy, shouldn't there be more people in charge of this?
I think that's where the analytics side plays into it. You've got to do a better job of analytics of what has happened and how that potentially will translate into future happenings, to work side by side with the cap market value type guys. So I believe all that works hand in hand, at least trying to project a player's worth based off of not only the money side and the economics, but the analytical side of what the numbers say if it's going to be money well spent. So short answer is I think analytics and the financial side should definitely have as large a room as possible to try to prevent you from making poor choices all the way around.
Are you suggesting or believing the analytics team Pittsburgh has is assisting in the salary cap juggling side of things too?
I would look. I don't. The short answer is I don't know, and I'd be foolish to try to pretend like I do know within all that. But I do think in today's advanced analytics world that I would like to believe that there is, yes, we're looking at a player not from not only a financial side, but from an analytical performance stats whatever side, and marrying those. What does it say in your own bio? Marrying tape and analytics. I think all those work hand in hand to help and how that side of your organization can help. The more that you spend on it, the more the bigger the room, the more eyes that you have looking at it can help prevent you You're still going to make bad decisions along the way. Some reasons beyond your own control. Whoever would have guessed what happened with Stephon Tuitt or Ryan Shazier and those kind of things there. But I do believe that all those things should be interlocking, and I believe they do in all organizations to some degree, some more than others.
Sure, you're right. I mean, analytics, of course, plays a role in projecting, is a player worth it. I mean, I think analytics, though, primarily will tell a team, is a player worth extending, and less so on the financial aspect of cash and cap and structure and those types of things. That's kind of my sense of how analytics and the salary cap side, the salary cap team coordinate with each other.
Right, but the analytics team should at least be working alongside with, market with whoever's in charge of the financials of what the market value is going to be, what the cash outlay is going to be. Even if a player's worth X amount of money, what is that actual cash flow? How much are we going to have to put into
Amortize?
amortizing just from because we've got to what's the word I'm looking for? You got to put it in escrow. Because you got the whole bank and the financial aspect of showing that you're good for that money too. So you have to have that plan. It goes a lot deep. We've lost half the damn listenership right now, but
it's just you and me now, Dave. It's a conversation, less of a podcast.
It's in a very important side of the business that not enough. Definitely, beat writers don't go this far in it. And look, for the half that listeners that remain listening to this episode right now, it's why you are listening to this, because we address this kind of stuff, and I've always tried to predicate myself of trying to lay out to listeners and to readers of what I think is a good not only to some degree what I think should happen, but I want to lay out to listeners and readership of what fans of the team should expect to happen beyond what I think should happen, because I want them to be versed of why something did happen after the fact and really ahead of the fact too.
Agreed. That's kind of the ethos of Steelers Depot, of the website, to tell you this is what is likely to happen, whether or not we agree with it, and why it's likely to occur or not occur. But that's exactly my point. Of you kind of went down a couple of different aspects of escrow and all the nitty gritty of these big projections. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars per year for a multi-billion-dollar franchise, and there's going to be two people handling the financial side of it. It just feels like not a great way to go about it. And I do wonder, is the analytics team really coordinating in that sense in terms of helping on that side of things? I don't know if they are, at least not in Pittsburgh.
I'd like to think to some degree they are. I just don't look. If I got locked in a room for an hour with Omar Khan, I would like to learn. I would like to know the answers to all those questions. And one of the first, what I would also like to know, why didn't you get TJ Watt signed earlier?
Yeah, be a great question. I do think it helps, though, when your general manager is so well versed in that background as Omar Khan is. I know that there's some maybe knock you can put on Khan for not having that true football evaluation background. Wasn't the boots on the ground, Lesto scout the way that a Kevin Colbert was, the way the role traditionally presents itself. But I think it is valuable when you have Omar Khan that understands it so well, and now has an assistant GM like Andy Weidel, who has that more old school, football guy background to help on the evaluation side. So I do think Pittsburgh benefits from there. And you've seen teams like Philadelphia with Howie Roseman and his financial background really be able to help build that team out to become a juggernaut. So I do think even if it is just Khan and Marco really handling the bulk of that, you have somebody with such a background like Khan is going to give you a leg up, I think, financially.
Look, you want the end all do all where the Steelers need to be better as an organization. They need to draft better.
Plain and simple.
From there, making decisions I'd rather be forced to make a lot of big time decisions that are all worthy of those decisions than not having enough players or trying to figure out how we're going to put this puzzle together that we have to spend X amount of money, and this is what we have lying on the table to work with. So and it all starts, especially with an organization like the Steelers, and look, every team to some degree says we have to build through the draft, right?
Sure.
But the Steelers, based on until their model changes of how they treat free agency and all like that, not top of the market guys, and at least we did see them, and they almost had to do it from a cash perspective anyway, didn't they? They almost had to go out and trade for a guy like DK Metcalf and give him the contract they had, just from we have nobody in our own building worth not only wide receiver but but to give a contract to. So how much was that deal for DK Metcalf, which was really out of the norm for the organization? How much was that predicated from the sheer aspect of going back several years and not drafting well?
It's a byproduct of it for sure. Had you drafted properly, you may not make that move because you probably are paying George Pickens that money that Metcalf got instead, had Pickens been exactly the type of player and person you envisioned when you took him a couple years back.
Look, DK Metcalf was a $35 million cash expenditure on the books now for 2025. What happens if you didn't go out and do that? We're talking
Right.
about this team having a $75 million cash spending windfall right now. So
And
they
there's no
all,
way they could have bridged that.
I mean, there's
There's a way.
always a way, but
Well, yeah, I mean, had they been in the position they were right now, they probably would have spent more in free agency or maybe traded for a different receiver. But point taken. I get what you're saying.
so I guess it kind of goes hand in hand. They put themselves in a corner and look, did they fully intend? You could roll this back to last year and the whole Brandon Ayuk thing, they probably were hard and heavy in on Brandon Ayuk last year, trying to put that puzzle together for the 3-year span, for the sheer fact that Kenny Pickett washed out, so there was no 5th-year option or quarterback mega deal to go down the path of. And even though you did what you did with Cameron Hayward, there was no new really cash spent there. It was just the moving the money around, right? Because of the guaranteed money there. They essentially got themselves in a position this offseason where they had to go out and do something out of the norm, like trade for a high market player, regardless of the position. But not only that, they had to make them top of the, they had to bring him in from the outside, make him the, top earner on the team, APY, which was against what really out of the norm for the team. And then, not only that, throw $35 million worth of cash at him for this year to help balance the books a little bit.
Well, can you make the argument that's one reason why Pittsburgh might be waiting so long for Aaron Rodgers, because where else are they going to spend that kind of cash this year at quarterback?
Yeah. Exactly. That's kind of been the crux of this, of why I think that they almost have to wait for Aaron Rodgers unless they go out and trade for a guy like their hands are tied.
Wasn't that concerning when a franchise feels like their hands are tied? They're making decisions based on cash?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because that's what you outlined as the concern being for next year. You don't spend that cash, but it feels like that concern might be something Pittsburgh is feeling right now.
Yeah, but you're doubling down on it, and you've got the cap going up even more, and you've got you've got no discernible hard list on who you're even going to spend that money on next year, and especially if you don't spend it on TJ Watt this offseason.
Sure, it'd be worse next year if you waited another year to spend that cash, but it doesn't make it good now. It just makes it not quite as bad as it would be next year.
Right, and that's why I say this: if you want to fault this organization for one thing over the last, several years, it's they how many first round guys have they? How many players in total that were drafted have gotten? Obviously some have gotten extended at all, but I mean, let's at least they had the Alex Highsmiths of the world. But how many how many drafted players, especially first or second round guys, have they drafted that have got to second contracts that were eye raisers?
Yeah, I had that tweet a couple weeks ago. I can't pull it up right now, but we can just go through the list quickly. Top day 1, day 2 picks since 2019. Devin Bush, Deontay Johnson, Justin Lane of the 19 class. Johnson got a second contract, traded midway through it. 2020, Claypool and Highsmith. Highsmith got a second contract. 2021, Najee, Freiermuth, Kendrick Green. Freiermuth, only guy to get a second contract. 22, Pickett, Pickens, Leal. Nobody got a second contract. Leal technically could. I'm going to safely say he's not going to get a second contract. And then you're at Jones, Porter, and Benton, and Washington. Those guys not eligible for a second contract yet of that group. We'll see. Porter could get one. Ben could get one. They all could get one still, but no one's guaranteed.
Right. I mean, and it rolls back too with the whole stuff on some of these things you don't see coming, right? The Tuitt thing, the Ryan Shazier thing, and all like that. But I think all this boils down to the point that I'm trying to make here is because of what's happened in the past and the way this organization runs, it makes it easy for me to predict another 40 million. It's easy in cash, and it makes it easy for me to predict TJ Watt being part of that, and either, like it or not, Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins being part of the quarterback situation because of the situation they're in. And if you want to snowball all this all the way back, it's had you hit on Kenny Pickett, then how much does that change the landscape, and just any first rounders as a whole since really TJ Watt, right? You got to draft better overall, especially if you're not going to be a team that likes to go in and overpay market value in free agency.
Right. I mean, just putting the rough math together and even looking at the 2018 class of Edmonds, Washington, and Rudolph. I mean, Rudolph came back to Pittsburgh, but I'm not going to say he got a second contract in the sense of they re-signed him and he never left the Steelers. So that's since from 2018 to 2022, you had looks like also a core force part of that as well, of that 2018 class. So you have, 15 picks in the first 2 days, and you only signed 3 of them to a second contract. And that was Highsmith, Fryermuth, and Deontay, who was traded midway through that contract. That is abysmal, Dave, to sign 3 of 15.
What look, neither one of us think this team's going to win the Super Bowl, right?
I'm sorry. A core 4 got a second contract, right? So amend that to 4 of 15, although core 4 did not see that contract fully through.
Right. And they were almost, for lack of a better word, almost kind of forced into trying to give it. I mean, having to give it to them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. They were kind of that was when the O-line was really bad. A core 4 kind of looked better by comparison, and they gave him the contract.
So the point I'm going to now is neither one of us believe that this team legitimately has a shot. Look, we're just hoping this team can get themselves in a spot where they win a playoff game, right? And what a sad state that's become. Where that's where we're hoping, what we're hoping for. Even though the organization's out there saying, "Oh, every year we're our goal is to win the Super Bowl," yada yada. But why are they in the situation that they are in right now this year specifically? This many years beyond Ben Roethlisberger retiring, Stephon Tuitt for personal reasons leaving, the whole Ryan Shazier thing. You're several years removed away from that, and you can't help but go back to this team just hasn't done a good enough job drafting players.
Correct. I agree. And they got to get back to that. And hopefully this year's class and last year's class, some of the injured guys look like the players they were drafted and intended to be. And not to lay it all at the feet at this one decision, but I made the point then, I'll make it again. I will remember Kevin Colbert fondly as a Steelers GM. I thought he did a great job. He put 2 more Lombardis in that trophy case, but the decision to let him finish out his term through May of 2022 and go through the draft and go through free agency instead of stepping down in January of 2022, allowing Pittsburgh to pick the successor and then let that guy run through the first full offseason proved to be very costly, where you drafted Pickett and Pickens, Leal, Austin, Hayward, Robinson, Oladokin. The return wasn't there. There were a couple of hits, but it wasn't the way it needed to be in the way that the Pittsburgh hoped it would be. And I think it set this team back, where Omar Khan had to spend time kind of cleaning up those messes. And of course, you're still feeling the effects of some of that by not having a franchise quarterback and needing to still address defensive line and, still uncertainty at receiver with Pickens now out the door. So I think that was a big mistake Pittsburgh is still feeling the impact of.
Hey, here's the thing. One other thought on cash. I don't think that the Steelers have unwisely spent cash over the course of the last, dating back to let's say the TJ Watt contract. Since then the mega contracts have obviously been TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Cameron Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Pat Fryermuth, and I think kind of that's it. That's the list at this point. I think for what they paid each other, structure of contracts, cash spending, APY, and I know people are driving off the road, but I can't believe you think Pat Fryermuth's deal was a fair deal. I think it was right about where I had the market value on that, and most other people as well too. I think Alex Highsmith was a smart deal. You look at what they did with the cash in both. I don't think they were. In other words, I don't think they did a bad job when it came to how they allocated cash. The problem is they haven't had enough players overall to spend more cash on for fair market value deals. And that's why they had to go out and do something with DK Metcalf. Look, George Pickens would have himself a new contract right now if they trusted George Pickens more from the personal side.
Yeah, he would have DK deal essentially.
All right. So what is that? They might indeed have both those guys if we're being honest here.
Potentially, it would be a lot of money on receivers, unusual, but not impossible. See what the Bengals are doing with Chase and Higgins. Sure. Yeah, no, I think you framed it well. They have not spent unwisely on the players they have given extensions to. And the one good thing I will say about quarterback is they have not locked themselves into a bad quarterback contract the way that the Browns have with Deshaun Watson, the way the Falcons have with Kirk Cousins. But to your point, they have not had enough talented players to spend money on. And that has been the problem.
And look, regardless of what happens in the cash spending from here on out this year, they are. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but I mean, they're almost. It feels like they're close to almost having to put themselves in a position to pay Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton next offseason. Having to, barring both those guys just falling off the cliff.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where this year takes us and what free agency looks like. Because those things wouldn't happen until the summer next year in all likelihood. So you go through free agency, you kind of see what you spend and take it from there. But I get your point.
All right.
All right. They said
that ended up being more of a conversation for me and you, but we didn't expect to spend that much time on it overall. But I mean, if you want to know what the crux of the Steelers situation is right now and why they are where they are right now, A, you don't have a franchise quarterback, and B, you outside of that, they haven't drafted as well the previous X amount of years to have more players to pay.
Yeah, 100%. So at the very least, we provided good background noise, I hope, for people. Right. But in the way that Pittsburgh is knowing what they're signing up for with Aaron Rodgers, you know what you're signing up for when you listen to Dave and Alex on a mid-May, late May podcast where there isn't a whole lot else going on. We find some rabbit holes for you and I to go down.
All right. I either thank you or I apologize for all that.
Or both. All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
Ooh, we're about 2 hours here with that discussion. Let's see. David O writes me and tells me he has an article augmenting the 2007 Steelers Legends team. Anyway, so Elijah, look forward to David O addressing the question that you had here in an upcoming post. So thank you, David O, for tackling that. Deshaun Campbell, sup guys? Know you guys have already answered a lot of questions about Will Howard and the Steelers draft for next year, but my question is this: if the plan is to sign A-Rod, that puts Mason as the number 2, how likely is it the Steelers don't draft a quarterback in the 2026 draft? They give Howard a real look because up to that point, he probably won't have any game experience. When you look at the quarterback 27 class, which I think Arch Manning will come out, and because studies shows when you're starting quarterback in college don't transfer well to the NFL. With all that said, you will have guys like Arch Manning, Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, Julian saying I think the Steelers could give Howard a real chance, and it doesn't work. The 2027 class looks general. Sean, you're way out in front of where Alex and I are at this point. Basically, he wants to know, I guess, what is the possibility the Steelers don't draft a quarterback in the 2026 draft and give Howard a real look, and then work towards 2027. That's so many variables there.
Would not expect this as we sit here today. Listen, I'm excited about Will Howard. I'm happy Pittsburgh drafted Will Howard. You guys know that. But there is, I think, a little we're a little over our skis on projecting what Howard could be or is. Let's let this guy throw a pass, make the team, go from there. As the reader says, unlikely to play. Certainly won't be expected to play in 2025. I wrote about teams who, quarter of the league starts 3 quarterbacks each year, so maybe that happens. But we have time. Let's get through the season. Let's watch Howard. We don't have no decisions have to be made on any future quarterback stuff now. So let's get through the year and see where things stand in January of 2026.
All right, Jordan Pearsall writes in, I know you guys wait until after the season to start checking out draft prospects, but I think under these circumstances, the fans would love for you guys to dive into some of these quarterbacks throughout the year. From scouting so far myself, I think this class is even deeper than people realize. Besides the typical names of Manning, Sellers, Nussmeier, Aller, Klubnik, make sure you check out guys like Taylor Green, Darren Mensa, Dante Moore, and Jackson Arnold. Also, does Aaron Rodgers signing basically end any chance of Will Howard getting a chance to prove himself, with the Steelers' worst kept secret being the 2026 quarterback class? How Rodgers play, assuming Rodgers even signs, how Rodgers plays, all dictates Will Howard getting a chance. How the team perform. I mean, once again, we're opening up a huge Pandora's box by trying to guess any of that. As far as scouting quarterbacks early next, there's just not enough time for Alex and I to go deep into. Look, I'll be watching college football, I'll be paying attention to the quarterbacks, yada yada, but in no way, shape, or form will I have time to deep dive this quarterback class until after the 2025 season is over. But look, throughout the season, we have the summer scouting series. We'll have Jonathan Heitritter, I'm sure, and probably a few others dedicating more than normal time on the quarterback class, and that's about the best that we have to offer, right?
Yeah, we'll certainly have some insight. I think we'll pay additional and extra attention to the college football season from the site standpoint, from a future draft standpoint this year. It may not always be Dave and I writing about it or opining on it, but we'll have a focus on that because it is going to be such a unique situation where you can kind of really predict Pittsburgh having interest at quarterback a year out. So we'll do something to address that for sure.
All right. Amos writes in, first off, I started listening to y'all in 2020 when everything was locked down due to COVID. I have since listened to other Steelers podcasts. None come close to the true professionalism and journalistic integrity that the two of you hold as a standard. Thanks for the hard work. Boy, that's quite a statement. We appreciate that there. My question is a bit of a hypothetical, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment in how 3 tragedies have changed the trajectory of the Steelers as it pertains to roster construction in the last 10 years. 1, the career-ending injury to Ryan Shazier. Perhaps we don't reach for Devin Bush, he writes. Number 2, the death of Stephon Tuitt's brother. I believe he was injured at the time, but perhaps he returns and doesn't retire. 3, the death of Dwayne Haskins a few weeks before the 2022 draft. It seems maybe Colbert was set on drafting a quarterback anyway, but it does make you wonder, with newly signed Mitch Trubisky, Haskins that they seemed excited about, and Rudolph, would they reach for Kenny Pickett? He says, I guess we'll never know, but interesting in hearing your thoughts. Look, we sort of hit on that throughout some of this show when talking about the cap and the cash and how things played out. First and foremost, it would have obviously been nice to see what may or may not have happened with Dwayne Haskins. However, I wasn't counting personally on there being a lot there overall. Rest in peace there. Could I have been wrong? Obviously, I could have there. I think about that less, other than just the overall tragedy of it, than I do think about what may have transpired, Shazier and Tuitt. But even if things had not happened, I mean, you could look at, had Shazier not had the serious injury, would that prevented them from doing what they did with Devin Bush? Yeah, I think that's easy to look at. How much had Tuitt lasted? What has this team really done in regard to addressing the position on defensive line, even without Tuitt?
They tried Liao, they drafted Benton, and then Harmon this year.
Right. But, how much longer would Tuitt have look? Tuitt obviously was on top of the world kind of player about the time that all that transpired, right?
He was in the prime of his career. He's still how old is he right now? He's only 32 right now. Actually, today is his birthday, I think. May 23rd. Yeah, it's his birthday today. Happy 32 to Stephon Stewart. So he in theory, probably still be playing right now.
Right. Look, you could drive yourself crazy thinking about the what ifs and the hypotheticals associated with all this. But how many years ago was the Shazier injury? How many years ago now has it been since Tuitt abruptly retired? You probably would have had to at least move on. You still would have been expected to draft better between those things.
Sure. No, 100%. But you do wonder. I think Pittsburgh as a franchise has a lot of what ifs. What if Le'Veon Bell would have taken his agent's advice and signed with Pittsburgh? I know that's not as serious as Shazier and Tuitt and Haskins, but there are so many what ifs that you can apply to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the last decade.
All right. Speaking of Elijah, who we just talked about a little while ago, I think did I send this email to you, Alex, all the autographs that he has?
I don't think he sent me the email, but did we talk about it?
We talked about it, but anyway,
Okay.
he has sent photos. Maybe David will include these in the post or whatnot. Remember, he's the one that talked about all the legend players that he was collecting the autographs from the 60s and 70s, I guess, and all like that. Anyway, quite a collection Elijah has. So we had asked him to send along a list and pictures, and he did. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Elijah. And David O, I think, will answer your question. He just sent an article that Dave mentioned over about filling in kind of the extra roster spots theoretically for the Legends team. So, yeah, that was a good email that I think led to a good conversation and a new article for the site that should drop this weekend.
All right. Thank you for that, Elijah. So with that, I think we've got through the bulk of these. This ended up running 2 hours overall here, or right at 2 hours. Didn't expect it to go down this road, but heck, hopefully some people got some things out of it. I'm interested to get some feedback maybe about the cash and cap from people that listened all the way through this and what they think overall here. So with that, we'll wrap it up here and say you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way. So until Monday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.